going? My name is Jess and this is Reason. Today I'm joined by Lance Forman, a British businessman and former MEP politician. We will be discussing Liz Truss's budget and leadership so far. Let's start the conversation. So, what do you think of Liz Truss so far?
I think she's been bold, and she's also, I suppose, listened to what people have said and reflected. And people say she's U-turned. Some people call it a change of direction. But there is a big question over whether it was the right decision in the first place to make the tax reduction from 45% to 40%. So that's a question that some people believe we should, some people believe we shouldn't. Then, of course, there's a second question over whether she should have stuck by it when she'd made that decision. But I was up at a Tory party conference at the start of this week, and there was certainly a feeling there that people had resigned themselves to the fact that she had made the change. And actually, I think sort of felt quite positively. And in the end, they know who she is, they know what she believes in, and what the party needs to do is just unify and get behind her. This idea that we should be considering another leader now is just ridiculous. She's barely been in the job for a month. Give the woman a chance. Nobody knows what the future holds. There have been arguments for hundreds of years about the best way to handle your economics, and these debates go on and on. But we've tried the other orthodoxy for a long, long time now, and it hasn't worked. It's led us to the rut that we're in. Give the woman a chance to actually do what she believes. She was voted by the Tory party as the leader. I would say give her a chance, and I'm fully behind her.
Why do you think so many party members aren't welcoming Liz Truss with open arms? And why do you think that there's so much scepticism towards her already?
Well, the party members backed her, and they remain very much behind her. MPs I just think they're weak. I think that they're led by the polls, and that's not leadership at all. Doing what you think people want to hear basically means doing what you think the press are telling people they ought to be hearing. Leadership is about having a view, a philosophy, an ideology perhaps, and trying to convince people this is the right approach. That's what leadership is. And it's not always popular when you're trying to convince people, but if it works, they realise later that it was the right approach. And I think that MPs just spend too much time reading the papers, and maybe they should read a few academic textbooks and understand economics. Some of the stuff that I hear people, some of these MPs spouting is bizarre. And the other thing is, they don't have real commercial experience, and I think that is a real problem. I know a lot of business people that when that budget came out, they were jumping for joy. They thought this was a really great budget. And in fact, some of the papers, the Daily Mail had on their front pages, finally we're getting a Tory budget. But then, the markets were spooked, and I have a view on why that happened. The press jumped on top of it because the press love a panic. The press sell news on the basis of panics. And then, of course, all the MPs panic because they think that things are going horribly wrong, and then they call for Liz Truss to reverse everything. It's just ridiculous. Just calm down. Our economic situation is no different today to how it was a few weeks ago. 99% of what was in her budget was trailed. She spent the whole summer talking about what she was going to do. None of this should have been a surprise. And, all she did, the main economic things that she did was just reversing, tax increases that Rishi Sunak had put up. It wasn't as though she was changing anything dramatically. Even the higher rate tax, she was just preparing to put it back to where Tony Blair had it for all those years he was in power. There was nothing truly radical. I look forward to some real radical stuff coming forward.
What real radical stuff do you look forward to then? So do you think the budget hasn't gone far enough? What do you hope to see in the future of Liz Truss's government?
Well, I hope to see a re-evaluation of the way we do things, both in terms of tax and also deregulation. Any business person, that's all they want. They basically, it's what you have to remember, and what your viewers and listeners have to remember, is that it's businesses that create wealth. Businesses create jobs. Businesses end up creating the wealth which pays the taxes to fund public services. Governments do not create wealth. Governments can facilitate wealth creation. Banks do not create wealth. Lawyers do not create wealth. Businesses, are the wealth creators. And the best way for businesses to create wealth is just to be left to get on and do it. And the more government's in their hair, the harder it is for them. And when I was at Party Conference, I was giving a speech at the Taxpayers Alliance, giving examples of petty regulations. 90% of businesses in the UK are small businesses and family businesses. And the number one reason why they pack up and decide, we're not going to do this anymore, and we're just going to give up and stop, trading. It's not because they're not making a profit. It's not because they haven't got any succession, don't know who to pass the business on to after they've been in it for 25 or 30 years. The number one reason is they get fed up with red tape and all the petty rules and regulations. And I know in my business, come into work, you're sort of tearing your hair out, thinking, oh God, another mad rule. It just drives people mad. And so, I think what we're hoping for is that she changes the way she steps outside the box. And in tax too, rather than doing what other chancellors do, look at the books, look at what's coming in and what's going out, say, well, if we add a percentage here, we'll raise another 2 billion, and if we lose a percentage there, we'll lose another 2. Rather than doing that, what she's going to do is actually look at all of our taxes and say, do we really need to have this tax at all? Should we have inheritance tax? Should we have corporation tax? I think there's a really strong case for actually completely scrapping corporation tax. And that's something the IEA wrote a paper on a few years ago. I've written my own paper on it. And I think the government can raise more revenue by completely scrapping that tax. And it would really, by removing it, you would have a massive investment boom in the UK. Every business from all over the world would want to come and relocate to the UK. So these are the things that I think she will do.
How would you respond to the argument that this budget only benefits the rich?
Well, clearly it doesn't only benefit the rich. Well, it doesn't now because she's reversed the higher rate tax. So, but I don't believe that it would have done anyway. When George Osborne reduced the rate from 50% to 45%, the government it raised an extra £9 billion in tax revenues. Higher tax rates don't mean higher tax revenues. If I increase the price of my smoked salmon, it doesn't mean I'll sell more of it. I might sell less of it if the price is too high. And it's the same with tax rates. If you put the rates up too high, people might think, I'm not going to work that extra hour because I don't want to be paying 50% or 60% to the government. So I think the thing is, putting up tax rates or keeping tax rates high and then reducing them isn't about helping the rich people save money. It's about helping, it's an aspirational thing. It's about helping people on the ladder create wealth because they need that incentive. So it's not about helping the super rich that already made it, and they can save a bit on tax. It's an incentive to encourage people to become richer and to create wealth. They don't have to do it. We're in a very mobile world. If you're a young entrepreneur setting up a business, you don't have to do it in the UK. You could pretty much do it anywhere nowadays. In America, the highest rate of tax is 37%. Here it's 45. It's 37, and you don't even have to pay the 37 until you're earning $500,000. So, we have to consider the international comparatives as well. But, I go back to what we said before. Tony Blair set it at 40%. You know, everyone was happy there. No one was saying, "Oh, we must increase it to 45, or we must increase it to 50 because it'll be, it's going to raise more tax." Gordon Brown kept it at 40% throughout his entire premiership, right until the very end. And then what he did is he lifted it to 50 because he knew he was going to lose that election, and he knew the Tories would be lumbered with 50%, and he knew the optics would look bad if they said, "Oh, let's lower higher rate taxes." It was a game, it was a trick by Gordon Brown. And when George Osborne became Chancellor, he sort of half fell for the trick because he didn't drop it all the way back to where he should have done. He didn't have the balls to do it. So he just dropped it back to 45%. And he should have gone all the way, because dropping it at 45, as I said, it actually raised 9 billion in extra tax revenue. He should have gone to 40. That's what Liz Truss tried to do now. But of course, everybody's sort of, they're so narrow-minded. They don't actually see the real opportunity for our country in being a low tax driven aspirational economy. And that's what they should be looking at, rather than saying, "Oh, the rich are going to be richer." That's the rich. The thing is, Jess, the rich have become richer not because of lower taxes. The rich have become richer because of low interest rates. Low interest rates have meant there's been this huge asset bubble, and that has only benefited rich people, because if you had assets, they're suddenly worth a lot more. If you never had assets to start with, you didn't get richer. It's the low interest rates that have helped people, and Labour and all the media are complaining about interest rates going up, which they should. They need to go to a more sensible long-term level, and that will improve wealth and equality.
How do you think she's handled the energy crisis?
Well, that one's a tricky one, because she's been dealt a difficult hand. She's become prime minister at a time that we've got this energy crisis, but all politicians are to blame for this, and it's nothing to do with Putin. That's really important. When you hear them saying, "Oh, Putin is creating this energy crisis," he hasn't. I know this personally because in my business, my energy costs, my electricity costs doubled last October. They went up from £200,000 to £400,000, which was a nightmare for us. This was last October, 5 months before the war started. Gas prices then were 9 times higher last October than they were the previous March. Nothing of this is due to Putin and the war in Ukraine. He has exploited the situation. He's taking advantage of it, but the situation was already there. And the reason we're in this mad crisis is purely because of net zero policy. It's all down to net zero. We've given up on fossil fuels and put all our we basically bet everything on renewables, and renewables are unreliable. And the fact is, what they've done is they've made fossil fuels unreliable. And let me explain that. The national grid is obliged to buy wind energy. That is a political obligation. If wind energy is available, they have to buy that first. But wind energy isn't available all the time. Obviously, if it's not windy, you can't get wind energy. So what they need to have is gas in the meantime. But if you can only use gas when there's no wind, suddenly you've made gas as unreliable as wind. And therefore, if gas is unreliable, no one has wanted to invest in gas and fossil fuels. And that's why fossil fuels have gone up so much in price, because everyone's moving into this unreliable renewable industry with heavy subsidies too. It actually costs, because I think we should be fracking, and I can come on to that. It actually costs 8 times the cost to get wind energy than it does to frack for natural gas. I'm not talking about with subsidies or without subsidies or what they're charging. I'm talking about the actual cost of building the turbine, having the team of people to manage it and run it. That, when you compare that cost to drilling a hole in the ground and literally letting the gas come up and using that, renewables or wind cost 8 times the price. So I'm not saying in some time in the future we shouldn't be doing it, and I'm not saying we shouldn't be doing it now, but it shouldn't be subsidised, and the grid should be forced not to buy renewable energy above gas. It should be forced to buy the cheapest fuel available, because when there's competition, that will drive down the price. And it's pointless having renewables if they're not affordable.
Great. My last question is, do you think Liz Truss will be the next Margaret Thatcher, and do you think she should try and be the next Margaret Thatcher?
Well, she is a Mrs. T, so that's because she's got the right initials. That helps. Um, I Mrs. T, the original one. Her one of her famous quotes was the lady is not for turning. And what we've seen with Liz Truss is that she has turned pretty quickly. But the difference is that Margaret Thatcher had time. She was leader of the party in opposition. She had time to sell her message in advance. And so when she made the sort of tax changes and changes that she did make, people knew where she was coming from. With Liz Truss, she's suddenly been thrown into number 10. She hasn't had, she was selling her message during the hustings, but I think only probably Tories were listening to that. If you're a party member, you'd listen because you had to decide who to vote for, but the wider public might not have been listening so much. And so she's been thrown into this. She's got 2 years until the next election, and she's tried to bite off and perhaps bitten off more than she could chew. I think what she needs to do now, everyone said, well, it wasn't necessarily a bad policy, but she didn't lay the ground. I think what she needs to focus on now is laying the ground, explaining her philosophy, explaining why her policies will work, and actually just trying to get people to understand them. Because it is, there's nothing, I think her policies are great. And I understand the policies, people that put forward the sort of policies we've been having for the last 20 or 30 years. I don't think they worked. We wouldn't be in this situation if they had worked. So I think it is time to go back to sort of the more Thatcherite approach, the Liz Truss approach. And I actually think that if she sticks by that, I think there's every chance she will win the next election. People have written her off way too early. Things change far too quickly, but I'm actually quite optimistic. And also the other thing worth noting is that when you compare the UK to the Western world, we're actually not performing badly at all. We've got the second lowest debt in the debt to GDP in the G7. So when everyone says we've overborrowed, well, only compared to Germany, but everybody else, USA, France, Italy, and so on, they're far, far worse than we are. So yeah, no, I'm really good with Liz Truss, and I'm looking forward to seeing what's coming.
Thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe. A reminder that on the 3rd of November we have the Reason Student Summit coming up with speakers such as Nigel Farage, Maya Toosey and Darren Grimes. Tickets are selling out quickly, so make sure you get your ticket now. Thank you, goodbye.